How are you?
Doing really, really well. Did you have other dogs or is that your only dog?
It's my first dog.
First dog.
Yes.
Oh, wow. What made you decide to adopt him?
I've always wanted a dog. It's just that I travel so much for work. In the past year, I've had to travel a lot less, and now coronavirus, not at all. So I'm happy.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
And what did you say you named him?
Zorro.
Zorro. Okay, Zorro. That's pretty cool. I like it.
Do you have dogs?
Yes, we have one. He's a English Shepherd. He's
Mm.
spoiled rotten and has a temper. I don't know where he gets it from, but
Little sassy pup.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm so excited to hear you present. I understood you presented in Colorado?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. A couple
Okay.
years ago, I think. Yeah.
Were you a breakout speaker or were you a speaker in the main?
That at that time they didn't have breakouts.
Okay.
I don't think. Yeah, so it was everything was on the main stage.
Okay. I'm excited. They said Laura, Colleen and Laura talked really highly about you, and so they're like, she's gonna do great. We're so excited. She's coming on.
Lower your expectations. I want this to be a little bit more interactive, and I don't know if it's going to take the full hour, but I'd really like this to be. Obviously, I'm going to present some stuff, but I'd love for there to be conversation and people sharing on their own as well.
Okay, great. I'm excited. Do you want me, if somebody starts putting information in the chat, do you want me to interrupt and read that for you while you're talking, or do you not want me to interrupt until the end? How do you want me to?
Yeah, I think like interrupting throughout where it makes sense, that'd be great. I'll pepper in some questions for people to post responses to in the chat, and then we can like address those as well.
A lot of our ladies on Zoom will not want to have conversation, so they'll put their answers into the chat. Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure it would be good for me to stop you and read them and stuff like that. We do have a lot of interaction by chat.
Definitely.
I'm gonna go get some coffee, more coffee. It seems like we're getting a good group coming in.
I just wanted to see like what everybody else was doing.
We still have about a few more minutes to wait to let the team come in.
To wait until okay. Well, You're on mute.
Mhm.
So if you want to unmute, you can right click your name. So scroll like over here to see your name. Okay, and you'll be able to.
Everybody's learning the new ways of Zoom.
Hi,
How are you doing?
I am good. How are you?
Really, really good. It's good to see your face. It's good to see faces.
Yes.
Hi, Soph. How are you doing?
Doing good. How are you?
Doing really well, ma'am. Thank you for joining us today. We're super excited about our presenter. No pressure, but she's going to be amazing.
No pressure at all.
I see Marcia coming on as well, and Amy.
Send any message they want all the way through our social media network. Yeah, easily. It's not even hard. In fact, probably just watched it happen. Just don't know. Sorry, I was saying take that instead of take that.
Man, the junior really got hit bad. So just to give you some feedback while we're waiting, we're super excited about our conference. Not sure if you all, everybody knows, but we are going to be virtual. But we're looking at some pretty cool swag to put together, some cool stuff to send you guys out. We are going to have a deadline on the swag. So as soon as it gets released, you're going to want to go in and sign up so we can make sure we get you your package in time. After the deadline, even if you do sign up and pay, we can't ship swag anymore because it would be too close to conference. But we're looking at t-shirts, you know, the really cool shirts we get. They're really soft and comfortable, and we're really, really excited about our speakers and our presenters and being able to bring you a really awesome experience. The board has been working really hard, Colleen, on collaborating to figure out what it's going to take so that we can have as much networking and interaction together, because I think that's what makes it so much more fun, the networking and being able to see the faces we haven't seen in a while. So I'm really, really excited about that. And our website, we're having some new things coming up to our website as well, and those should be rolling out really soon. And so you guys are going to have a lot more benefit as members. And so we're kind of excited to bring you that as well. We're still working hard, you know, in the background, and Colleen and the board has been doing amazing work.
Is there a theme yet?
I think it's called Lead. There is a theme. Let me look it up. It's a good question. Our theme this year is, and if you go to our website, you'll see our new our logo. It's really cool. Kind of looks like the Olympic fire sign.
Is it lead forward?
Yeah, lead forward 2020. Thank you for that. We're going to give it just a few more minutes before we get started, just so we can allow a few more people to come on. We have a good number. I think we have a few more missing from the registration. So we wait until at least 10:04, 10:05. You guys want to say hello to each other, please do so. And then we'll get started about 10:05. How does that sound? Some great new faces. Hey, Melissa.
Hello. How is everybody? How's everybody holding up during this pandemic and all the craziness?
Doing good. It's been busy. It's been really, really busy. How about you?
It's been challenging. I'm such a people person, so I miss the trade shows and meeting people and traveling. And so the extrovert in me is really had a hard time. Even virtually, it's not the same. And plus, I'm a hugger, so I'm like, oh, I want to hug everybody, and I can't. So, but just got to do other things to. I've been listening to a lot of Simon Sinek on YouTube. He's really awesome. I love his stuff, and his thing on why is really good. So, just trying to do more self-development stuff, you know. So
That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, it's for sure different.
Amy says she feels you, Melissa. She misses people and hugging people too. There's a really good book I started reading. It's called The Art of Asking by, let me give it to you. It's really, really interesting. It's a different perspective on how other people ask for things. The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. It's a really interesting read. She did a TED Talk, but it's really eye-opening. If you guys have not had a chance to listen to it on Audible or read it, check it out when you do get an opportunity. It really opens up your eyes to perspectives, and sometimes how we live in blinders because we don't see different viewpoints. Or she just really opened me up to how people ask for things that you may not understand that that's their way of asking. It was really cool. It's called The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. I'll put it into the chat. One more minute. We have some more people coming in. Seems like we're going to have a pretty good house today. Everybody wants to hear the Leslie Gildea, the renowned Leslie. I got a call from the board and was coached about how wonderful she is. So super excited.
Setting these expectations way too high. I was just sharing my quarantine focus right now. I just adopted a little miniature poodle, and he's the love of my life, sitting right next to me. That's what I'm doing on lockdown.
Why don't you show him?
He's taking a little nap right now.
Randy says poodles are the best.
You're so smart.
Jennifer wants to know his name.
His name is Zorro, because he has the fur color of a fox. And Zorro, I didn't know this, means fox in Spanish.
Okay, well, it's 10:05. We're going to go ahead and get started. Leslie Gildea, she is the VP Growth Development for ServiceTitan. She had share topic today is developing executive presence. She said she is making it interactive, and so she wants to make sure we get comments and feedback. If you guys just want to put it into the chat, then I'll go ahead and interrupt and have those conversations for you. But if not, if you want to unmute yourself and then just mute yourself back so that we don't get too much distorted feedback in the background. But Leslie, I'm going to go ahead and let you take it over. So excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Leslie Gildea, as you said. And I've been in the HVACR industry for about 5 years and a member of Women in HVACR for over 2 years. And I'm very excited to spend this time with you today to talk about executive presence. Just to reiterate some of the ground rules, I really would love for this to be as interactive as possible. I'm not going to be presenting a deck. It's 8 a.m. my time on a Friday. So let's have fun. Let's learn from each other. Let's support one another. I don't think we'll take the full hour, but we'll be asking questions throughout this session.
Hey, Brian.
So please make this as engaging as possible for everybody. And post in the chat, we'll get to those questions and responses. So executive presence. I know I chose this topic, but I actually didn't hear of the term executive presence until about a year ago. Just being honest, I didn't even know what it meant. So I wanted to start by sharing more about why I wanted to use this time today talking about it. So even though I didn't know what the term even though I didn't know what the term executive presence meant until somewhat recently, this actually has been an area of development that I had unknowingly been working on for the past few years. So I, like many of you, have been working in male-dominated industries for the majority of my career. And as recently as 4 years ago, I kept encountering the same obstacles over and over again. I wasn't being taken seriously. My ideas were being dismissed or sometimes stolen. And frankly, I was plagued with self-doubt. So despite that self-doubt, I had self-confidence at my core, and I knew that I had more potential. So I just started to tackle areas of personal development one by one, and I found that my career growth was starting to unlock. And when I finally learned what executive presence actually meant, I realized that many of the areas that I'd been working on related to exactly that. And I'm still a work in progress, but I would like to share with you some of the things that I've learned and observed, and also hear some of the tips that you have to share as well. So, executive presence, what is it? If you ask different people, you're going to get different answers. And if you ask them how to develop it, you're not only going to hear different answers, but you're also going to hear very vague answers. So feel free to post in the chat. I'd love to hear from you what executive presence means to you. So just chat, what do you understand it to mean? And I think the reason why it is hard to define is because it's more of an art than a science. Having executive presence is not just some laundry list of traits that you're ticking off. It actually reminds me of this Supreme Court case that defined what obscenity means. So the case was trying to figure out, what does it mean to be obscene? And it was a case about pornography. And the judge said, I'll know it when I see it. So I think executive presence is just like that. It is hard to define, but you know it when you see it.
We have some responses. Arlene is saying it's a professional look, a way of speaking. Amy Meyer says it's how you're perceived. Laura says it's charisma. And Katie says it's being able to inspire confidence. Brandy feels it's emotional intelligence and the ability to use it when you communicate, inspire, charisma, motivation, etc. And I think it's your brand, how you brand yourself and you present yourself every time you walk into a room, every time you speak with the people that you're around. Laura Lynn says where encouragement and challenge meet.
Yes to all of those. I think all of those are what executive presence means. I think a good way to think about executive presence is the way that you make others feel. So as Amy said, how are you perceived, charisma, all of those things are impacting how the people around you feel. So if you can make others feel that you are a capable person, someone trusted to make decisions and recommendations, and someone who can communicate confidently and authentically and has the ability to inspire, then I'd say you have executive presence. But why does it matter? Why is it important? In a survey of C-suite executives that Gartner ran, executive presence was listed second on the top 20 list of leadership traits. So clearly, it is a critical factor in driving your career success. The impressions you leave on those around you can dictate whether you move up in your organization, whether you're entrusted to take on more important or more impactful responsibilities, whether your opinions will be taken seriously. And even if those of you on the call are business owners, you're at the top of the food chain, executive presence can influence how your employees will respond to you. Your presence can make them feel inspired to do more, or it can leave them feeling doubtful of your capabilities and impact their performance or even employee retention. So I'd love to know if any of you have experienced any obstacles in your career because of perhaps a lack of executive presence. And feel free to post in the chat and we can circle back to those. But the good news is that you don't have to be born with executive presence. It's not necessarily this innate skill. It's something that you can cultivate and develop. And that's where I want to spend more of our time today walking through is how do you get it? Well, there are many ways that you can develop executive presence, but I'm just going to walk through some more of the fundamental ones, and then we can discuss any additional ones you have to share towards the end. And I want to be clear that there's not one singular way of having executive presence. However you decide to incorporate these tips or work on developing executive presence on your own, it's important to still be authentic. So make it your own, develop your own style. Otherwise, it's just not going to translate well to other people. They're going to read that it's fake or it's an air that you're putting on. So the first way in which executive presence is developed or perceived is in how you act. It's your mindset. So much of what you're conveying to people is actually being conveyed without you even realizing it. It's in your subconscious.
I have a chat for you from Laura Lynn. She says, I think a lot of time for me, it is easy to allow our ego to get in the way. And sometimes it is so important to listen with the intent to understand versus the intent to reply. It has been something that I have been actively working on.
I love that, because we're going to be talking about all those things right now. So like I said, so much of sort of how you're perceived is coming from your mindset. It's from your subconscious. If you don't have confidence in your own capabilities, it's likely that others are actually going to see that, and they will then lose confidence in you as well. So the first tip I have to share with you that worked for me to help with your mindset is to fake it till you make it, baby. So how many of you have seen Goldie Hawn's laugh challenge on social media? I love Goldie Hawn. Yes, she's amazing. So she has this laugh challenge. She preaches about the power of laughter. And she's been challenging people to post videos of themselves laughing, even if they aren't in the mood to laugh. She's encouraging them to force themselves to laugh, because ultimately laughing will make them happy. And then that laugh becomes genuine. So similarly, pretending to have confidence in yourself over time can have the same effect, because most of the time we actually are competent. We do have the skills. We don't have to fake those skills. We just need to fake our self-confidence until it becomes real. So that's definitely something that worked for me. And over time, that confidence actually became real. Another important thing you can do to change your mindset is to be more confident in mastering your inner voice. So that's also something that I've worked on. I started really paying attention to my inner dialogue and proactively changed it so it was more positive and encouraging. I lived with this imposter syndrome. I'm sure many of you have heard of it. Maybe some of you have had it before. And I really believed that I didn't belong in certain meetings. And as I rose the ranks at my company and I joined the leadership team, I spent the first few weekly leadership teams thinking that I didn't belong in that room. I thought I wasn't smart enough to be in that room. I was the only woman. There was all these men with what I thought to be crazy, amazing resumes. But then over time, it's not a knock to them, I started to realize that those other guys weren't that smart. They weren't as smart as they weren't that much smarter than me. They just had different areas of expertise. And I also had value that I could bring to the table. So we just had different subject matter areas. And just because I didn't know a lot about finance didn't mean that I wasn't worthy to be at that table. So I started telling myself a little bit of a mantra before meetings. I just said, you belong here. You belong here. You belong here. And that really helped me, just having that mantra to change my mindset. I don't need to say that mantra anymore, but it definitely helped me develop my confidence earlier on. And I know it sounds so cheesy, but I really believe in the power of mantras and being intentional about reprogramming your inner mind as a way to empower yourself. So I have a couple other mantras that have helped me, but I would love for others to share in the chat if you have any mantras that you have found to be helpful in really changing that inner dialogue. I'll share another one that I have. Last year, I'm a people pleaser by nature. And I made last year's motto, my mantra, I do what I want. And I even got a little mug with a cat on it that said, I do what I want. And it helped me. Having that mantra made me stop being as much of a people pleaser.
What was your first mantra?
I belong here.
Brandy's saying one of mine is not me, then if not me, then who? If not now, then when? And that spurs me into action.
I love that one. I need that, actually. I might steal that because I've found myself procrastinating as of late. So I definitely think I'll take that one.
Katie says, be brave, not perfect. I like that.
Yes, because so often we talk ourselves out of doing something or taking chances because we're worried we're going to mess it up or maybe not be 100%. That's okay. Just do it. Be brave, not perfect. I love that. So we've covered some areas where executive presence can develop in the ways that you're acting. And I'd like to move on to how you communicate. Oh, Cheryl, another one. Quality, not quantity. I like that one. I actually think that's really fantastic because I recently have also learned, I understood the 80-20 rule, understood it conceptually, but I wasn't actually applying it to my life. And I just found myself spreading myself way too thin, and I wasn't making significant impact in any area because I was spreading myself too thin. So just focusing on the most important initiatives, quality, not quantity. So that one really speaks to me as well. So moving on to communication. To show leadership, we need to communicate in a way that projects confidence when we speak. So that can be in the words that you use, or your tone of voice, or the flow of your discourse. It can take many forms. And with verbal communication, it's important to project confidence when you speak. So I know a lot of people, they use phrases that diminish their presence. For example, they say, this might be a stupid question, but well, guess what? It's usually not a stupid question. I actually find people who ask questions in important meetings to be really brave and to have more leadership qualities because they aren't afraid to admit that they don't know something. And I guarantee that most of the time, they're not the only person in that room who didn't know the answer to that question. So just ask that question. Those qualifying statements like, this may be a stupid question, doesn't project confidence. Another phrase I've heard, I was wondering if it might make sense to, instead of just making a recommendation, they're putting a lot of caveats and uncertainty around it. So instead say, I believe, or I recommend. And another thing that especially women tend to do is say sorry a lot. And I started to actively change it. Even if I was sorry, if I was late to a meeting, I actually tried to reframe my vocabulary and I started saying, thank you so much for your patience, instead of saying, I'm sorry I'm late. And I think those small things start to add up in the way that people perceive you.
Arlene is making a comment and she says, make statements as statements, not with a question mark at the end. Start with a number, yes or no, or I will find out, and then explain. And Laura Lynn says, how to facilitate test was so good, and it helps to establish your mantra based on your personality and how others perceive you. Mine is determined results. Sally Hogshead does a great pod on entre leadership.
Oh, I like that. Determined results. Oh, that's interesting. And speaking to Arlene's comment, definitely make statements as statements. So that was another tip I had, which was avoiding upspeak. Upspeak, if you're using it, you're not really projecting confidence. Upspeak is when your intonation rises like this. So it sounds like you're always asking a question, and therefore it always sounds like you don't know what you're talking about. So I totally agree with that. Make statements as statements. Don't ask. Put them in the form of a question if it's not really a question, and avoid that upspeak. Another tip is to avoid filler words. And I'm telling you, I actually struggle with this one. I say so a lot, or as a transition in between sentences. I'm sure you'll hear it as I'm talking now. And sometimes I say, do you know what I mean? When I'm trying to get some type of assurance that the listener is actually engaged in following me. But when you use filler words too frequently, it can completely detract from the message you are trying to convey. I remember when I was in law school, there was a fellow student who raised her hand to make a legal argument in class. And it may have been the most amazing legal argument in the world. I have no idea, because I could not listen to the words coming out of her mouth, because she used the word like every 3 or 4 words. And I automatically just dismissed her, which is horrible. But it's something that happens. This is how people perceive you and the way that you speak. And it's how important it is to make sure that you're not adding unnecessary words sprinkled in throughout your sentences.
I think that's like asking or being okay with silence.
Yes.
Not feeling that you have to say something. I know my phrase is, does that make sense? When everybody's really quiet, and I'm like, yes, of course it makes sense. Like, why do you have to ask that? You know?
Yeah, definitely. And I do that too. I think it's coming from just my need for some type of assurance from the listener. But that is also coming from a lack of confidence in myself. If I had confidence in what I was saying, I probably wouldn't have needed to say that. It is also important to be concise in your language. When people are rambling as they're trying to make a point, and they're going down this sort of flow of logic, going on tangents, it's very easy to lose track of what they're saying and just stop listening. Having strong presence means that you're able to deliver your message effectively. So think through the logic and the flow of what you're trying to get across before you speak, and try to make it as concise as possible. So many of these habits of speech are ones that we're actually not even aware of. I am sure that that student in law school did not know that she was saying like as many times as she was, and was not aware of how people were perceiving her. So I think it helps to actually record yourself speaking, so you can start to see how others perceive you. And the way that I've started to work on my own verbal communication is by joining Toastmasters, which is a speech club. I love it. It was like dating. I had to go to multiple Toastmasters clubs to find the one that matched my vibe and my energy. They have chapters all over the world. If you haven't joined one and you want to work on your speech, I highly recommend it. And at my chapter, they actually record your speeches, so you get to play them back and spot areas for improvement.
Soph shares with us, she says, I try to change my sorries to gratitude as a mid-step to letting it go altogether. And thank you for your patience, and said, instead of sorry, this is late. And she also says, a Toastmasters group at my former employer helped me with reducing filler words, practice.
It is practice. You have to be so intentional about these areas of development. In communication, it's not just about the way you speak. As somebody mentioned earlier, it's also about the way that you listen. Think about people that you've worked with. I can think of many who always seem to be distracted when you're in a conversation with them, when they're checking their emails or their texts as you're having a meeting one-on-one with that person. And it doesn't inspire confidence in them, does it? In fact, it probably makes you feel like they don't care about you. And empathy is such an important part of executive presence. So active listening is important. Really stay in the moment when you're talking to somebody. Make them feel special. I wish I had this skill. It's something that actually I'm going to start working on next, is to make somebody, when I'm talking to them, feel like they're the only person in the world. I think that's such a magical skill to have. So make sure you're not just waiting for the speaker to stop talking so you can get your point in. Actively listen, make eye contact. I know a lot of people who are saying, I'm good at multitasking. I can listen as I check my Instagram. Well, it doesn't make me feel good, so please stop doing that. Give them your full attention, because at the end of the day, people remember how you make them feel. And if you don't make them feel valued or important, then they won't view you as a leader that they can really get behind. There's a Maya Angelou quote. She said, "People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And I think that is so true. I don't remember half the things people say to me or do to me, but I remember my feelings that I have towards them. So in addition to communication, somebody alluded to before, appearance or how you look is also important. Making a strong first impression is so important because it imprints into people's minds and shapes their view of you without you even realizing. And the first impression you get of somebody is usually how they look. So let's start with body language. When you enter a room, people are scanning your body language for nonverbal cues. They may not realize they're doing it, but they're doing it. They're looking at the expression on your face, your posture, your stride, the amount of eye contact you made, or any other clues into how you're feeling, who you are, what your level of confidence is. So how can we make sure that we're sending the right message through our body language? So one way of showing that you have confidence and you're a leader to be reckoned with is just to take up more space in the room. So I'm not saying y'all should be manspreading and invading the personal space of others, but think about maybe how your mindset is influencing the physical space that you're embodying. And I'll give you an example of something I've seen personally many, many times. Women colleagues attending a large meeting in a conference room, and there's a big conference room in the middle of the table, and then along the periphery of the room there are seats, there are other chairs. And the women will enter the room and they will sit at the periphery of the room, even if there are open seats at that table. And that right there kills me, because it is a non-verbal cue that you do not deem yourself to be a main player in those conversations. And that is a mindset, defining the way that you're physically taking up space, and people can see it and they will read into it even if it is subconscious. Another really important first impression that you make is with your handshake. When you shake somebody's hand, look them in the eye and give them a firm but not too firm handshake. This is a useless tip now that we're in coronavirus, but let's just imagine a world where we are shaking hands. I actually almost convinced my boss not to hire one of my colleagues, because when I met him, when he was interviewing, he had this limp fish handshake, and I just lost all respect for him. I know that's awful to say, but it's true. I just completely judged him on his handshake. And he was brought on, and guess what? He is one of the biggest all-stars at the company. I've also, on the flip side, met people who had this vice grip handshake and actually hurt my hand. It was uncomfortable. And that made me immediately suspect that they were trying to overcompensate for something. So first impressions really do matter. Your handshake matters, your eye contact matters, the physical space that you're embodying in a room matters. And other body language tips that I've received, but I have not mastered yet, are making sure that you have good posture and that you have an open stance even when you're sitting. So people who are less confident, they tend to try and shrink their bodies as much as possible. Maybe they'll sit with their arms crossed or their legs crossed, their shoulders are hunched over, or maybe they're leaning back like this. But those who are commanding a room, they are sitting in an open stance. They have straight posture, open arms, legs firmly planted on the ground. I like to think the reason I'm not doing all of that is because I'm 5'2", and in most office chairs, my feet actually don't fully touch the ground. So I often have to sit cross-legged in chairs. I'm just going to blame that on my height, but it's an area that I'm trying to work on. Eye contact, yes, Arlene, and posture, all of that, so important. So I'd love to know, what are some other body language behaviors that you've seen or maybe done yourself that don't necessarily inspire confidence in others? This is body language.
Let me share one for me. When I first started joining organizations and walking into rooms, I had a tendency to want to get stuff done. So I'd walk into a room and I wasn't smiling because in my head I was doing a job, doing this, doing that. And a girlfriend of mine, she walks in and she smiles at everybody and hugs everybody. And I would walk in and be like, doom, doom, doom. I need to do this, get this done, get that done. My head was spinning. So she would stop and tell me, you know, people are intimidated by you because you don't smile. And I'm like, I do smile. I am nice, you know. But it was when you walk into that room, it's what you portray. So I've had to teach myself to stop before I walk in the room, take a breather, and walk in and be intentional with my smile.
Are we the same person? Because I have that problem too. And I've received feedback, direct feedback about it. I have a case of RBF. I don't know if you all know what that means. If you don't, Google it. But I just don't necessarily smile especially if like you, I'm thinking about something or, you know, I'm ready to go. We're type A people. We're just trying to get stuff done. But taking that time to be intentional about that smile is important.
Cheryl says, looking at their phone constantly. Marika says, I have received constructive criticism on my RBF too.
Don't fidget or play with your hair or makeup. Yes. I actually do. I have a problem with fidgeting with I do something like this. I try to stop or at the very least like hide it under the table. But work in progress. Just trying to work on things one at a time.
Brandy says, I have a coworker that looks at the floor when they are present.
Yes. And Brandy, I'm sure that doesn't necessarily project leadership when your coworker is doing that. So that's a great example.
Sophie says, it's a fine line, especially for women in a male-dominated industry, to be engaging without setting stereotypes of women as chatty, flirty, etc. It is a fine line, and sometimes it's difficult to figure out how to work it.
I love that comment. And I have a question for potential discussion later, just about what does executive presence mean for women versus men? Because I totally agree. It translates differently based on gender sometimes. So in addition to body language, how you actually present yourself with your appearance, your looks, influences people's perceptions of you. And appearance is a trickier one. I struggle with this one because I feel like women are just constantly being told what to do and what to wear. I mean, and at the same time, I can't deny that first impressions do matter. So we should, to some extent, care about it, what you're wearing. What I think is really important with appearances boils down to two things. Don't make your appearance a distraction, and dress in a way that makes you feel confident. So if you're dressing in a way that is just completely out of sync with your company culture or just plain distracting for some reason, you're wearing neon all the time or something, you're not really doing yourself a favor. So keep in mind how others at your level or above around you are dressing and just try to keep in line with that. It's important, I think, to keep your own style, still dress and attire yourself in a way that's true to you. But anything that's too drastically different can bring people's focus to how you're dressed instead of what you have to bring to the table. So it's a distraction. And I'll give you maybe a more extreme example. So my boss was in a very important meeting with me and a very important partner. And he kept going like this, like leaning back in his chair. First of all, that's super casual body language behavior. And I don't know why he was doing that. And then he didn't realize that he had a huge hole in his t-shirt. Also, why was he wearing a t-shirt? And there's a hole here, and his armpit hair was just poking out and saying hello to everybody in the conference room. And it was all we could look at. And I was trying to figure out a way to basically tell him. Ultimately, his executive assistant came in and pulled him out of the room and made him change his t-shirt. But that was a complete distraction. How he was attired was a distraction. So it is important to recognize that the way that you present yourself to the world doesn't necessarily have to enhance the way people perceive you, although that would be great, but it should definitely not detract from the way that they perceive you. I see some advice here.
For me to speak up, One thing that I heard while speaking on a panel at a women's group that I really took to heart was, as women, we need to do a great job of helping one another realize when we've made bad choices. A woman on a panel gave an example of working in an automotive facility, very male-dominated situation, where there was a woman who worked there that everyone called prom queen behind her back. The woman was frustrated because she wasn't respected, her ideas weren't taken seriously. And the friend of mine on the panel realized that she hadn't done the right thing. She hadn't told this woman that she needed to make some changes about the way she dressed for the environment she was in. It was a difficult conversation. Fast forward a couple of years, I was making sales calls with a young woman right out of school. And on a 90-degree day, she thought black corduroys were a good idea, and otherwise wasn't quite dressed for the weather or the situation. And on the way home, I said, hey, let's talk about what business casual means, and opened up the conversation. She was really warm to it. She was fresh out of college and just truly didn't know any better. I've continued to mentor this woman over the years. She doesn't dress the way I dress, but she doesn't have to. She's dressing for the role she has, and she's much more successful because people are listening to her when she speaks, instead of wondering why she has her winter clothes on in July.
I love
We have
that.
some other comment here from Leah that says, a piece of advice someone gave me once was to dress for the job you want, not necessarily the job you are in. Mary says, Southern mother always said, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. So you're getting some good feedback on that.
Yes. Arlene, I wanted to circle back. I think what you just shared is fantastic, because women empowering women, it's so important. And it takes a lot of bravery and courage to be able to have that kind of conversation with somebody where it's a very vulnerable situation for them, and you're sort of putting yourself out there. So that's really inspiring. So we talked about just making sure you're not dressing in a distracting way, but I also like to make sure that you dress in a way that makes you feel confident. So as Marianne and Leah alluded to, dressing in a confident way can also mean dressing for the job that you want. And that can mean different things to different people though. So I've seen some women wear jeans and t-shirts to work every day, and they exude confidence and authority, and they are effective in inspiring that in others. That works for them. I personally like to wear suits and business attire every day, not on quarantine lockdown, but when I go to the office. Even though I work for a tech startup where many people are just dressed in hoodies and t-shirts and jeans and sneakers, I prefer to dress more formally. It's how I saw my mother dress go to work when I was growing up. And it makes me feel like I have my battle suit on, giving me some extra confidence. And science has actually proven that there is real validity behind dressing for the job that you want. There was this Yale study that was done showing that men who wear suits are better at negotiating than men who are wearing streetwear or sweatpants. So in the study, the more casually attired participants, they caved in earlier during the negotiations. And there was this other study that showed that more formal outfits led to higher abstract thinking and problem-solving capabilities, and that wearing a lab coat like a doctor helped you focus better. And athletes who wore red instead of blue were able to lift heavier weights. So even though I would prefer we base our opinions on what people bring to the table, appearance matters, and what you wear matters. So where do we go from here? Before we I have some discussion questions that I'd love to throw to the group. But before that, I wanted to chat quickly about how we can start to maybe understand executive presence for ourselves. I'm sure many of you have already started working on that, but a great first step is to understand how people perceive you. How are others around you experiencing you? How do you make them feel? So ask trusted peers, colleagues, mentors, direct reports, just the people in your solar system. Ask them for feedback. Ask them about your communication style or your body language. but make the questions very specific so that they can't just give you like general vague answers. And on an ongoing basis, ask your peers for consistent feedback. So it's something that I do after big meetings or presentations. I will usually pull a trusted colleague aside, sometimes my direct reports, and I ask, what is one thing that I did well in that, and what's one thing that I could do better? And I think that's really important, because building a culture of feedback can only help us understand how others are experiencing us, but it also helps others around you start to self-reflect as well. So from there, you can start to identify some potential blind spots and start developing an action plan to tackle them. I've personally found it easier to just work on one thing at a time until I get it right, and then start one new thing that I'm going to work on. Because if I start trying to fix too many parts of myself, not fix, enhance more areas of myself, I won't really make a lot of progress in one area. So I'd encourage you to maybe consider a similar approach, choosing one development goal at a time. This also helps you be more self-aware, because you're only having to think about one aspect of your behavior at a time. So those are my tips today on executive presence. And I'd love to open this up to some more discussion so we can all learn from each other as strong, powerful women in this industry. So I'll kick things off with a question, and feel free to unmute yourselves or to throw responses in the chat. I have one question. How do you convey executive presence if you're working remotely? I personally would love to learn tips on that.
Can you ask the question one more time?
So how do you convey executive presence if you're working remotely? So if you're having to do video conference calls all the time, or you're not able to see people in person. Soph says, you have to start by sharing your video. Arlene, the way that you write, being on time, a clean background on video calls. Yes, since lockdown, I have seen many messy rooms in the backgrounds of people. I totally agree. Sending follow-up notes, summarizing actions, it just shows that you have your stuff together.
Valerie says, ask questions so others know you are involved in the conversation. And Brandy shares, my women in STEM group is studying this. A few things we have noticed is to use your video and not go black. Another is to be very agenda oriented if you are leading. And Melissa says, speak up. One of the things that we noticed is that especially if you're the speaker, you should never leave it black. We had a speaker who spoke but never showed his presence, and it wasn't engaging at all. So if you're going to be speaking, always make sure you're having your video running. Mary Jones says, being consistent in your availability.
Yes, and Katie also mentioned, I know it's been mentioned a couple times, the agenda. So everybody knows why they're attending and why it's worth their time. That is my biggest pet peeve, is when I don't get in the meeting invite, there's no meeting goal, there's no agenda, and I don't know why I'm supposed to be in that meeting. So what I've done is, when I'm invited to other meetings and I don't understand why I'm supposed to be there, I respond as maybe, and then I follow up, is there an agenda or a meeting goal? And if I don't get a response, I just don't go to the meeting. It helps me because I have too many meetings, and I want to make sure that if I'm going to a meeting, it's going to be worth my time and everybody else's time. But it also encourages other people to think about, great, how do I make this meeting more efficient and more effective for everybody? And I wanted to maybe go back to Soph's comment about executive presence for women. So do you think that executive presence means different things for men versus women? So are there ways in which executive presence is just different and you have to think about things differently, or maybe you can't do what works for a man because it's just not going to read the same way?
Laurelyn is saying hold meetings that are meat and potatoes only. Filler makes the team lose confidence. We all have plenty of calls a day. It helps the team understand you value their time as well as your own.
Definitely. I think meetings should be a forum where you're making decisions, not going through all the filler, as Laurelyn said. So executive presence for men versus women. I think I've heard from other women that I work with that they feel like if they are too confident or project too much confidence, it can come across as arrogance, and then it's not interpreted well by men. I've never experienced that personally, or maybe I'm just completely unaware of it, but it's definitely something I've consistently heard from some of the women that I work with.
Amy shares, absolutely. I think men can say things forcefully when women are seen as being cranky. I wanted to use the B word, but don't want to offend anybody, which is true.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I struggle with that because I think I'm just blind to, maybe I'm blind to it for me personally, but I've heard from so many women that that's the case for them.
I've had an issue where I've been in a meeting, a boardroom, and there's only men and I'm the only woman, and they will skip over me. And it happened in a meeting once. They were presenting to us, and the men skipped over me and asked the other men their opinion, and then they went on to the next presenter. And they did it a second time that they skipped over me. And so the first time I was like, they just skipped over me. And I thought, okay. The second time it happened again, because we were there for an hour. The second time it happened, right before, he says, okay, well, we're done. I said, I have not asked a question, and I have a question I would like to get answered before they leave. And then I asked a question that opened up a whole can of other worms that the other people were like, I haven't even thought about that. That's a good question. And then they started talking, having conversation. So when the next presenter came in, the board looked at me and he said, Sarah, do you have questions? So he addressed me first. But you cannot allow them to skip over you. But yes, it's part of it too.
Yes. That similar things happened to me where I'm in an important negotiation and the other party consistently turns to my male colleague, even if my male colleague reports directly to me, almost like they're dismissing me because I don't know why. It seems like something similar has happened to a lot of women here. I love Brandy's comment. I've heard for women to use data, and women have to use data and facts to assert opinions, whereas men perhaps are able to just say what they believe or feel, and that's okay.
You have Tracy saying, I've experienced many of the circumstances since transitioning to HVAC, the construction world. I spent 27 years in banking nonprofit and never experienced these types of circumstances. Arlene says, seek male advocates to do this. If you are the only woman, proactively ask for an advocate in advance of a meeting. That's an amazing tip.
Definitely. And even if there are other women in that room, I think making sure that you support one another. I recall having a boss once who kept stealing my ideas, claiming them as his own in meetings. And my female colleagues, without even talking to me about it, started correcting him. Oh yeah, that's such a great idea that Leslie had last week. And it just made me feel really supported and valued by my colleagues.
We have some great comments in the chat. Katie says, I think we're conditioned to automatically respect men. In my experience, women are encouraged to be more self-aware and accommodating of the culture in order to fit the leadership model. that has been set by men.
Yes. Definitely. Allyship, advocacy, not just women supporting women, but having those allies with men as well. It's so important. Well, I have one more question and then we can wrap. I would love to know if there was anything I missed. Obviously, we couldn't cover anything, but what are some other ways that you have proactively developed executive presence, and what really has worked for you, something that you worked on and you've seen it really exude that executive presence to others? I know I want to learn.
I know for me, what helps me is reading, listening to books, listening to other authors, especially women. I read The Art of War, just the basic one, and then I read The Art of War for Women. And it was a long read. It wasn't an easy read. It would like a chapter or two a week and try to process information, but it was really helpful to me. So I try to do that and listen to other people, what they're saying, that they're watching or viewing, and try to pick up some of those tips as well. You have some information. Lori says, being prepared and know what you're talking about.
Yes, to Macy, over preparing for situations. I found that to be very helpful as well, especially when I'm trying to pitch a big idea. I'll run through every single potential objection and prepare all of the counter objections and just make sure I'm completely ready to respond to everything. And it usually results in people accepting my pitch.
I think sometimes, you know, there's always fear in putting yourself out there, and there's always a chance somebody could reject you. So being outside of your comfort zone all the time, that's something I always try to, I have a friend that has this magnet that says, do one thing every day that scares you. And so just doing it, you know, there's always going to be that presence of fear, but just overcome it, just go for it, you know, and whatever it is that you're trying to overcome. I love this forum too. And Renata Nance on this Zoom meeting, one of the previous ones, she just reached out to me in email and said, hey, I don't know who you are. Let's connect. I want to know, you know, I want to know about you. And I love that she did that. And now when I see her at a future event, I can say, hey, you know, and we can hug and, you know, we have that connection. So I think just really just reaching outside of your comfort zone and doing it, and take advantage of that in this group too. Like look at the people on the call and reach out and see how you can grow together, and we could work together to make this industry even greater, you know? So that's my 2 cents.
Melissa, just to add to that, I think I heard that one of this webinars, kind of surround yourself with people that you want to learn from. So that's kind of that I've been kind of working on, and this has been great. And yes, I reached out to you, Melissa. We had a great talk, but every time you meet a new person and successful and driven woman like that, there's just so much to learn. So I think that's kind of my new thing, you know, surround yourself with those people that there's, you know, you can learn, take something from them, and yeah.
You have some comments in here. Star says, know the latest technology to present options. I memorize much of the code and become the go-to source when people don't want to look it up, which helps develop the relationship of them being comfortable coming to ask. Katie says, another book recommendation is Brave Not Perfect by Reshma Sajani. It's where I got my mantra. And Laurelyn says, there is a TED, why do I do something every day that scares me, by Emma von Dermerwe.
I love it. That's going to be my weekend reading and TED Talk watching. Well, that's all I had to share today, and I loved learning from you as well. I really appreciate you joining on this call as I shared more about my journey so far in developing executive presence, and I really look forward to learning from all of you in future sessions.
Thank you so much, Leslie. You did a great job. We really appreciated your presentation and your information, helping us get more comfortable as women in the workforce and having that executive presence. You've gotten some thank yous from the team that you were awesome, really well appreciated. One of the things, just to wrap up, as women, we are having our virtual conference. We're going to be releasing the site pretty soon. I mentioned it earlier. We will have swag that we will be giving with our conference. So we want to make sure that you guys sign up early enough, because if you go past the deadline, we can't ship the swag to you. So make sure you're paying attention to that, checking it out. Once it releases, let's get you signed up so we can get you the cool swag that we're trying to put together for you all. Okay? Anybody have anything else before we turn off today? No? Thank you so much, Leslie.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye, ladies.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, Leslie.
Hi, Mary Jane.